Thank you so much for coming today. It's my honor and privilege to introduce someone who I've known for a few years now, and who I knew her father before her. And Jewher Ilham is an author of 2 books, both of which you can find for sale in the back, and I encourage you to look at them during the break. She's a leading advocate for the Uyghur community and for her imprisoned father. Her father, Ilham Tohti, is a Uyghur economist and one of the leading voices in the Uyghur academic community up until his detention, which I'm going to ask her to talk a little bit about. She now works at the Worker Rights Consortium as the Forced Labor Project Coordinator and serves as spokesperson for the Coalition to End Uyghur Forced Labor. She's a co-producer of this award-winning documentary in which she also is featured, and her story is featured, about the plight of Uyghurs. And she's also an incredible, when I say she's an advocate, that word doesn't really begin to describe the young woman I know and have known since she showed up basically in the United States, and who came here, I think, frightened and probably terrified, actually, young woman whose father had just been taken away from her right in front of her, who came here to pursue her education and carry
for tourism.
Yes, came here to, and then ended up pursuing an education here, and has become a powerful, I think maybe one of the most powerful spokespeople for her community. In the human rights community, and this is a poem that I think, or that you find in a lot of cultures that have faced difficulties. I've heard it in Chinese, I've heard it in other societies, some version of it, and it goes something like this. They thought that they could kill us, bury us deep in the ground, but what they did not realize is we are the seed. And I think of you when I hear that, or when I think about that poem, and I think about that poem when I think of you. And so I am really grateful to be able to have a chance to sit here with you and talk about this film and about your experience. So Jewher, can we start with that experience with your father? If you can tell us a little bit more about your father, about who he is, what kind of person he is, what role he played in the Uyghur community, and where he is today, as far as you know.
Hello, everyone. I'm the daughter of jailed Uyghur scholar, economist Ilham Tohti. Ilham Tohti, my father, as I mentioned, he was an economist by training, but he was best known for his advocacy work on promoting for Uyghur rights, equal rights, and Uyghurs to not be treated as secondary citizens in China. And he spent decades to achieve that goal. He spent decades to use his expertise. He traveled to dozens of countries where different religions, different ethnic groups coexist together. And he wanted to learn from those groups if it's possible for people with different backgrounds, different ideologies, different ethnic identities to really peacefully coexist. And he found solutions. He found ways, and which he really actively tried to propose it to the Chinese government and to the Chinese society. My father was not only well respected within the Uyghur community, within the Uyghur academic community, but also within the Chinese community as well. And also he was well respected, well received in the international communities as well, because of his peaceful approach and because of his pure goal of promoting, ethnic understanding and building a bridge between different groups and help people to peacefully coexist together. However, a man like him has been labeled as a separatist, which a term that the Chinese government frequently used to justify their actions, to target whether it's Uyghur elites or any Uyghur individuals. So my father has been labeled as a separatist and sentenced to life imprisonment, although he had never publicly mentioned about separatism or promoted violence or extremism. And he's been serving life sentence since 2014. My father was, as Kelly earlier mentioned, was taken away in front of my eyes at the Beijing International Airport when he was supposed to be on his way to Indiana University as a visiting scholar for his one-year fellowship program. And I was supposed to be coming to the US for 2 weeks as a little tourist so I can go home and show off to my classmates that I went to America. But that supposed to be a 2 weeks trip for me ended up becoming now almost 11 years. And for my father, he never made it. At the airport, he was stopped from leaving the country. And I haven't seen my family since then. I have not been back home since then. According to Chinese constitutional law, not saying that the Chinese government ever respects its own law, right? But according to the Chinese government's own law, that prisoners have the rights to be visited by their family members or lawyers or friends. And for political prisoners, the prisoners have the right to be visited by their lawyers and their family members every month, at least every month. But for my family, from 2014, since he was detained, until 2017, my family was only allowed to visit him every 3 months. And even that, limited visiting rights were taken away from us starting from 2017. No one has seen my father or heard from my father since then. For a very long time, we had no clue if he was even alive until maybe 3-4 weeks ago, that the Chinese authorities, the National Security Bureau, reached out to my family in Beijing, pulling out a video of me and photos of me showing to my mother, saying that your daughter got to stop her advocacy work. She's getting too loud. And that if she stops, we will grant the visiting rights again. So that's the way that I semi-sure that my father might be still alive. I don't know if I should be relieved and be happy and grateful for their kindest and most generous offer, although that's our most basic right as a families of a innocent detainee. However, I conveyed the message to them through my mother that what they have offered is far, far, far from enough to stop me from my advocacy work, and that they have to do so much more, which including not only releasing my father, but also releasing all the innocent Uyghur people who are like my father, who have been locked up and persecuted. And they have to reunite all the separated Uyghur children from their parents, from their families.
Jewher, most people never will experience what you and your family have experienced. And even if they were to experience something like that, I don't think that most people would have the strength to do what you and your family have done. What is it that gives you that strength and that inner, that ability to say, this is more important than me and my father even?
Well, just like the title of my book, Because I Have to, the title of my book is Because I Have to, The Path to Survival, the Uyghur Struggle. That's the reason I put this as a title, is exactly why I have continued this long, is because I have no choice. Uyghur people have no choice because we have to. What do you choose when if you choose to pretend like you can continue about your life and go shopping and do your thing and enjoy going to movies, while your family members, your loved ones have been suffering, have been persecuted, and you cannot even lift up your cell phone and just make a simple phone call to know whether they're alive or not, what other choice do you have? Because people live in this world not only for ourselves, but for the existence of our loved ones, right? I believe, at least that's how I believe how human lives are like. And we don't only live for ourselves, we live for our loved ones. But if all of our loved ones are no longer here with us, then what other choice do we got besides fighting? Because this is a fight not just to make our guilt to be released and reduced a little bit, but it's really a fight for survival. And we're fighting not just for freedom, but actually for survival. And many Uyghur people have not only lost their freedom to live, to breathe, for freedom of expression, but also freedom to even have any sort of hope, any possibility of having any hope. Uyghurs who are trapped in the Uyghur region, especially because of the news, oftentimes blocked. There's very limited, access to information. Many Uyghurs don't even know the outside world is fighting for them, and they have to fight every single day just to not only for survival, but to see, oh, maybe there is hope one day. So, and I'm continuing this work for the past 11 years is because not hoping that I will be strong enough to release all of them, but I hope I can at least deliver a message to them that there is hope. And there are people like me, like everyone who is here, that it cares enough to do something about it, and that there will be hope. And one day, no matter how long it takes, that we will get our lives back.
When you think the topic of this conference today is about transnational repression, you've experienced this personally, and I'd like to ask you if you can talk about, you've talked a little bit about that, about how this affects you and how Beijing has threatened your advocacy and tried to leverage your father to stop you as an advocate. I think that, but I'd also like you to talk about how this has affected not just the community that you operate in, but what we heard earlier from Allison about academics and the whole discourse, I would say, around whether it's the Uyghur issue or China writ large. How do you see transnational repression, the effects, what are the effects that you see it having?
Well, first of all, I believe, at least from the human rights activists that I've been in touch with, when it comes to transnational repression, what those activists, what they're most feared for, it's not about their own safety, but it's the safety of the people that are surrounding them or the people that they are in touch with. Just like earlier, Dr. Ellison had mentioned about not wanting to go back just to not put people at risk because it wouldn't be ethical to do. Just 2 days ago, my car got broken into and nothing was stolen from my car. There was money, there was, nice clothing and different kinds of things that are valuable, but nothing was stolen, but all the paperwork was spread all over the place in my car. I do not have evidence that it is done by the Chinese agent. However, I have a great reason to suspect that it could be. And I have informed the authority. They are actually investigating it while I'm at this conference today. And things like this, I did not fear for my own personal safety, but I fear for my husband's and my neighbors. How are they going to feel about this? Whether they're going to be feeling safe living in that neighborhood as having me as a neighbor, or my husband having me as a housemate, and also his family who have had nothing to do with anything related to China in the past. Whether it is fair for them to have to experience such interference in their life, negative interference in their lives. And also, many activists, they have received certain levels of intimidations one way or the other throughout their advocacy journey. But the time when, oftentimes, the moment that they consider whether should I stop or tone it down is because their family's safety were at risk and not because of their own. And human rights activists have put themselves in the front line, and we already understand the risk. But our colleagues, our classmates, our friends, what about them? So that's the most concerning part, I would say. When I was back in Indiana, when I went to college there were agents sent to my class to monitor me. And the student confessed to me that I should be careful when I speak with him, and that he actually thinks I'm a good person and he doesn't want to report on me. And I appreciated his honesty, and that I understood that the Chinese government did find a 19-year-old student so threatening that they needed to spend money to send someone overseas to monitor that student's movements. But how about, I was fine with it, but how about my classmates? Their academic freedom. Are they going to ever feel safe enough to express their opinions in classes? How about my professor? You know, all these is like people around, surrounded by us. We concern about them the most. And I think that's an important part of a transnational repression when it comes to the human rights space, like activism space.
Yeah, this chilling effect that it has is really, I think, one of the most pernicious aspects of it. And that people, you know, they start to self-censor, they start to check their own behavior and stop doing things that they would normally do. And it undermines human empathy, I think, in a really, really dangerous way it really gets at the core of what connects us as human beings and makes us distrust each other. And that's, I think, one of the most evil aspects of this. I want to switch gears to talk about the film, because, you know, one of the ways that we fight back against this chilling effect is through shining a light on it. And that's, you know, what brought this film into being, and why did you choose to do this?
So from what I understood, the initial structure of this film was supposed to be about Hong Kong and the June 4th incident, and that was going to be touching on the Uyghur issue. And then the director and producer reached out to me through a mutual friend who was working on all these issues and said, oh, they're very limited people who are feeling safe enough to go public and be on the record. But there is one who just, yeah, she will say or do whatever you ask her if you want her to be involved in the film. So she reached out to me, and because of pressure from, you know, from the funding community, the donors and the organizations that are involved, in the end, all the donors wanted to pull out when the Uyghur issue was going to be a good portion of this film, and people didn't want to be really supporting this film. And that triggered our team to be like, actually, now we're going to make the film just about the Uyghurs. and I mean, was it hard? Yes, it was difficult. But for human rights activists, what is easy, right? And so we decided to dedicate this entire film into the story, the plight of the Uyghur people. And since 2018, we started filming since 2018. We have traveled to 37 cities across the world from 8 different countries, including the Uyghur region as well. We have footages from all these places, conducting interviews with survivors from re-education camps, from forced labor factories, family members of current and former detainees. You know, we've made this film, and it's not only about the tragic stories, but it has the beautiful moments of, you know, the culture, because many people, unless you're studying on the subject of China or political science, many people have not even heard about the Uyghurs before 2018. And we wanted to have this film to showcase why the Uyghur region is so important, why the Chinese government is targeting Uyghurs, what is happening to them, but who the Uyghurs really are. And you see a small drops of the dancing part. We have different aspects of the Uyghur Uyghurness in this film, and we wanted to showcase that. The genocide of the Uyghurs it's a huge part of the current Uyghur issue, but Uyghurs are way more to that. Did the Uyghurs want to be introduced to the world in such ways? In a way that everybody recognizes as the victims of genocide? No, we want people to know about the genocide, but there are more to the Uyghur identity, and we wanted to use this film to showcase that.
And I think that leads to another good question. I mean, you personally have taken on this issue of forced labor, which is very closely connected with the Uyghur genocide. It is a huge piece of it. The forced labor, the move from the eradication camps to this forced labor regime has been a big part of it. We talk a lot about what you can do as an individual, but one of the things that I think it's important to connect this to is the resources to engage in transnational repression that the CCP has and the PRC has. It costs money to hire people to do all of the things that they do in terms of transnational repression. So in addition to fighting against the evil practice of forced labor, which in and of itself is intrinsically, it's a violation of human rights, it's a violation of all sorts of international conventions, but it also has become a means of financial support for the regime's repressive activities at home and abroad. So it's a really important issue, and I'd just like to ask you to talk a little bit about that, as well as other things that individuals, in addition to supporting Uyghur and other human rights groups that are working on these issues, what can the average American individual who is concerned about these issues do to help make sure that they're either, let's start with not contributing to the ability of the CCP to terrorize people, and then, beyond that.
That's thank you so much for touching on this. So first of all, there is a coalition called Coalition to End Uyghur Forced Labor that was endorsed by over 400 groups or organizations and student groups and investor groups, trade unions, and also faith-based groups from over 40 countries. We have come together to form this coalition to tackle purely on Uyghur forced labor. Why? Why forced labor? Why not gender-based sexual harassment? Why not pervasive surveillance? Why not about the family separations or the cultural erasure? All of these issues are very important. However, the reason that we have chose to focus on the forced labor issue is because we believe that forced labor practices, the state-sponsored forced labor in China, is enabling all these human rights abuses that I have mentioned earlier that's perpetrated by the Chinese government. And without just think of it as a mathematic question, right? It costs tremendous amount of money in order to operate and in order to transform a region into an entire police state, to carry out DNA tracking, to forcefully implement IUDs in women's body, to build thousands of re-education and detention facilities, to locking up hundreds of thousands of police authorities, patrol officers, to monitor the entire region and to gain complete control. It costs insane amount of money. And the Chinese government has always been very smart with money. That's what we know. And they will not, the Chinese government have proven that they have never wanted to contribute positively economically in the Uyghur region. What makes them want to continue throwing money in this region for a very long time? That's because they're able to profit from it. By putting those detainees into work, they're able to keep those detention facilities to continue running, and it's a more sustainable way for the Chinese government by putting people into work. I know sustainable way, oftentimes we link up it in a positive topic, but for the Chinese government, the more those forced labor workers receives orders from overseas from multinational, international corporations, the longer those detention facilities, the longer those human rights abuses will continue to be carried out, because they are they're funded by those, practices. So that is why we have chose the forced labor angle to be able to, hopefully, eventually solve the bigger issue about the genocide that's happening in my homeland. And how do we get involved with that? People say, oh, China is so far away. I don't own a factory or a company. How am I going to contribute to that? The thing is, the supply chain is so complex, but it's all interconnected. There are at least 17 major industries have been linked to Uyghur forced labor. From the floorings that's in a building like this or in this building, cameras, the solar panels, the outfits that everybody is wearing. Do we know where they're sourced? Do we know who have touched it, who have made it, under what conditions? I believe most of our answers are like, no, we don't know that. While it shouldn't be the consumer's responsibility to find out those information, it is companies' responsibilities. But not all companies are, ethically, motivated to want to find out those information. That's why we have been fighting for legislations to be passed. And in fact, in the US, there has been a law dedicated to end Uyghur forced labor. It's called Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act that was passed in 2021. And it has been working. I wouldn't say it's a perfect law, but it had made great contributions in, easing the tension in the Uyghur region and closing and resulting in closure of some factories and some detention facilities. But things hasn't ended yet because we cannot just rely on one country to do that. Even though we want it, but the world isn't surrounded by the US. So there are more countries that are also sourcing from the Uyghur region. That's why we've been fighting for more countries to pass similar legislations to, address the Uyghur forced labor situation. And how about as a campus, what can people do? Well, on campus, we saw the little logos, those banners. The outfit says South Florida universities. Well, who are making those? How are they made? Do we have questions to that? Luckily, South Florida universities it's actually one of our affiliates for the Worker Rights Consortium. So congratulations for doing the right thing, and please continue to do the right thing. And that, our organization has been helping, universities, including, over about 150 universities, including South Florida University, to really look at their supply chain and to make sure that they have been, aligned with the labor standards, international labor standards. So we're hoping more universities can do the same. And we as an individual, we don't need as many new things. You can look as nice like us. We have several items on us that are thrifted. You can just look as professional and as nice, as decent, without having to spend, a bunch of money every week or every month or every season from a shopping mall. There are plenty of great thrifted options. And also, it is better for the planet as well. So for the environmental groups, that's a key point for you too. And also, on top of that, we don't need more than certain amount of numbers. I think we need to solve the overconsumption issue in this planet, even if we forget about the Uyghur forced labor issue. It's always been, I think this generation, it's something that we need to look at. And also fast fashion. Mm-hmm. When we're with the students, I don't see as many students present, but I do know brands like Shein, Urban Outfitters, Zara, H&M have been so popular among the students, but we do know all of these brands have one way to the other have been linked to forced labor, Uyghur forced labor, or other labor violations that's happening in this world. And I think we should be able to bring those topics into our classrooms. Add that to your syllabus if you're a professor. Add that to your school programs. And if you are not a university personnel, tell your families and friends. Your Uber drivers, every single Uber driver that I have had now know how to pronounce Uyghur correctly. I have made sure of that. And you could do the same.
Well, Jewher, as much as I would love to sit here and monopolize you and continue this conversation, I believe we do have some time for audience questions. So if anybody from our audience would like to join this conversation, you are very welcome. And you know where the microphones are now from this morning.
Thank you, Jim. Is that better?
Now we can hear
I'm
you.
Ron Weaver. I occasionally teach a Vladimir Putin course here in several universities. But today I'm asking, as I compliment you and your father, and I think your father won the Distinguished Enos Award for human rights. Is that correct?
Martinello's, he won 11. He's a collector of a human rights award.
And 400 academics from all over the world called for his release. My question is this. As I understand it, he's not being charged in China as if they would honor their own laws, but with separatism, which is a different kind of fate with respect to the nature of the prosecution of separatism. He is not being prosecuted for separatism. He is being prosecuted for shining a light on the problem of dissidents whom he defends, which should be, respectfully, in most constitutions and most laws and most cultures of the world, something which is protected, shining light on the dissidents of the country, not separation as separation. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the defensibility legally seems to be even less. Has the International Court looked into this?
No, unfortunately. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, the Chinese government does not respect its own law. And in fact, the Chinese government had repetitively altered its own law to fit into their own agenda. We know that recently released espionage law carried out in Hong Kong and also in mainland China as well, where people, as long as it's affecting the Chinese government's work in continuing their work in persecuting people, then they will alter their work, their law, or add into an interpretation. There's even Chinese special style democracy in China. There is Chinese style, Xi Jinping style Islam in China, altered Quran as well. So I wouldn't be surprised when the Chinese government will do anything they can to alter its own law to be able to justify their actions in persecuting elites or scholars like my father. Even though I am very well aware the Chinese government is aware my father is not a separatist or a criminal. They have monitored my family for decades. Even the police officers have said to my father that I wish we met in a different circumstances. I have huge respect for you. I have heard that so many times. And growing up, we had bugging devices in our living room. My father had bugging devices and camera with a cameraman in all his classes. And the Chinese government is well aware what kind of person my father is. But the only way they can justify their action to the public without having to provide concrete evidence is by labeling my father or any Uyghur individuals as separatists, because they can easily say it's violates state security. We will not be obligated to provide any evidence that you request.
Thank you.
And I think there's also, yes, like freedom of expression and freedom of speech are technically in the Chinese Constitution. Mm-hmm. These rights are stated in the Constitution, but there's a giant loophole that basically says that these things are decided by the Chinese Communist Party, and they are the judge, jury, and executioner of what those rights mean and who gets to enjoy them. Mm-hmm. And it's a very different concept of human rights than what we're used to, where we think of these rights as belonging to us as individuals, and then the government is there to protect our rights, not to decide what they are. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is, and what's interesting, one of the things that we've done in the United Nations is try to shine a light on the problem where I also worked at the United Nations and the US mission there, and it was a big struggle for us to try to explain to other countries, including European countries, that China is trying to change this concept of human rights from this idea that human rights belong to individual humans and belong mm-hmm. to us as human beings, to something that states decide what human rights are. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to enshrine this and rewire the international human rights system because they are so threatened by it.
Exactly.
Next.
Good afternoon, Dean Baxendale, Optimum Publishing. Again, thank you for your brave work and bringing this documentary, or soon to be premiered all around the world. On that point, what has been the support by Western corporations to invest in this project, and also given Ambassador Currie's work specifically around UFLPA and making organizations accountable, what would you like to say to corporations here in America who are ostensibly oppressing the Uyghurs by engaging in slave labor?
I wouldn't say all corporations are bad. I have to say that many corporations have actually reached out to us panicking before the passage of the law, letting us know, oh my God, I just read about this report. We don't want to have anything to do with this. How do we fix it? Please provide a solution. We have had companies, whether it's big or small, have reached out to us since 2019, when the first report of forced labor happened, like publicly reported via news outlets. So not all corporations are greedy, horrible, demonized. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. But I have to say, there's a large number or majority of the corporations had not made any proactive, positive change until there was a legislation that had passed. And we have brands like, I think there's a spice company, US spice company called Kelsec. They have exited the Uyghur region completely. In fact, I think they have exited China almost completely because we don't want to be at this high risk area. We don't want to have anything to do with labor rights violations. So they have moved their entire production to other countries. Was it a difficult move? Yes, it has been. It probably drove up their costs and also their quality as well, because the Uyghur region is known for producing, it's a perfect with the altitude and the climate has really produced great pepper and cumin. That's a side story. And the reason I brought it up is because I want to emphasize the Uyghur region is full of natural resources and different raw materials that really the international brands have been really taking advantage of. That's why they want to stay and want to take advantage of the low cost. But when I got in touch with the Kelsec's representative, they said they already sensed something fishy before even the reports came out. I asked them, how did you define the fishiness? They said, the numbers, the math didn't line up. When I looked at the raw material cost and the overall cost, they're not much different. Where did the labor cost go? That's because forced labor workers have been working for free or very minimum payment. And that's how some companies were able to, sense the fishiness of those human rights violations. But not all companies have, like Kelsec, that chose to react positively and to choose to do the right thing and be on the right side of the history. We have had brands like Hugo Boss, like Zara, who not only refused to do the right thing, but actually actively lied and even erased their evidence that they promised to share after we called them out with their evidence. They tried to erase it and even threaten to, take it to litigation, to lawsuit. There are brands who would react differently, and there are brands who are just staying quiet, slowly, privately doing the right thing, not wanting to be targeted by the Chinese government, because as we know, Nike and H&M, because of their public statement about the Xinjiang Cotton's link to Uyghur forced labor or human rights abuses, they have been wiped out of the map in China on Google, under the Chinese version of Google Map, so the consumers would not even find them. And the retaliation resulted in 20% sales drop in China, and which really affected the companies. Also, just to say, I'm not saying H&M and Nike are good companies. I'm just saying they got retaliated, but they kind of deserved it. And so I'm a labor rights person. I will always be skeptical and negative towards companies. So I'm trying my best to be neutral when it comes to them.
And that brings me to another question of what do you say to the argument that you sometimes, or I've heard over the years, that by trying to shut down these factories or trying that it's bad for the Uyghur workers, that you're throwing Uyghurs out of jobs and causing them economic harms?
That's actually a very valid argument when it comes to any other labor rights issues anywhere else in the world that is not using state-sponsored forced labor. So to define state-sponsored forced labor is involuntary work, whether it's paid or non-paid. And state-sponsored is carried out by the state, where companies do not have a say in what happens in their own factory. They do not have any leverage at all in their own company as long as it's located there. Therefore, when it comes to state-sponsored and with the intensive surveillance that's carried out, well, with the Uyghur region being an entire police state, is there really a way for international auditing firms, investigative firms to really confirm workers are speaking candidly and not, having their labor rights violated? No, they can't. And if investigators, auditors cannot issue, valid certificates to companies to ensure their factories are safe for workers, should companies operate there at the first place? And with the state-sponsored forced labor that's carrying out in the Uyghur region, oftentimes workers have been working between 12 to 18 hours with maximum 2 meals provided a day, oftentimes, sometimes skipping a day or two, and having way below minimum wage payment or no payment at all, while there are other human rights abuses being involved in those detention facilities, as I mentioned, from gender-based sexual harassments, physical abuse, political indoctrination, forced to denounce their religion and their culture, not allowed to speak their mother tongue, sending the workers' children into state-run orphanages. All these, I think it's enough reason for companies should exit. As a labor rights perspective, labor rights groups perspective, we oftentimes we never advise the companies to leave, because yes, we understand we would rather the companies to stay and to improve their practices in those factories, but those companies do not have the choice or space to improve their practices in the Uyghur region. The only way for them to make sure that they're not linked to Uyghur forced labor is by exiting the Uyghur region at every level of their supply chain, down to the raw materials, which is like cotton picking, solar, polysilicon and aluminum making. All these raw materials, they're all involved in the abuse of Uyghur workers. And not only in the Uyghur region is at risk. There have been reports of over 3 million Uyghur workers have been transferred outside of the Uyghur region to mainland cities in China like Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Beijing, Shandong. They've been working in factories, working for factories like Nike and other whether it's sport brands or other industry, non-garment industries, been working nonstop. Their condition might be slightly better than inside the Uyghur region because of, oftentimes there are Chinese workers present. But does that make it not forced labor? No. Uyghur workers do not have the right to refuse their work placements, do not have the right to choose what work they want to be in. They might be medical doctors before, they might be soccer players before, they might be comedians before, they might be professors before, but they're forced to work in factories, and therefore if those factories are shut down, the jobs will be returned back to the Chinese workers who chose to work in factories, whom now there's a huge job loss situation among the Chinese workers community, because factories have all the orders have been shifted to those detention facilities, forced labor. And it also resulted in factory orders lost in other nearby countries in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Philippines, and other major garment producing countries or goods producing countries. So it will not only benefit the Uyghur people into going back to their normal lives by shutting down those factories and making them lose their job that they didn't choose, and so they can go back to their lives that they chose to have. And they will also designate those extra orders back to countries that actually may need them to survive their economy.
To speed up the doing of the right thing, are there available AI and other technological techniques to enable companies like Bain, which was thrown out of China for doing the right thing and telling American investors where to invest and not invest with respect to these very forced labor and other problems with certain Chinese companies in which US investors did not invest because Bain Capital was telling them the truth, so they were ousted from China? Are there companies like Bain not yet thrown out, or maybe even companies that have been thrown out that have the ability, the technological ability with AI to ascertain where the forced labor is affecting these companies in order to shine a light on, as your dad's shown a light, thank you, shine a light on the companies that are benefiting internationally from the forced labor in China.
And just to kind of bring that to the fore a little bit more, I think that where we're seeing this is with that it's mostly entities that are based outside, and there is now a lot more pressure for various reasons for companies to know their supply chains from top to bottom, and that has created that demand, including from the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, has created whole new industries here in the United States. And maybe you can talk about Sayari and some of these companies that are doing this with data.
Yeah, so first of all, there is a technology, not to define where is forced labor, but to define what this product is sourced from. There's a technology, is it called isotopic technology?
Yeah,
Is it the
for the
right
cotton
word?
and for the other raw materials.
Yes,
Yeah.
so there is, for example, one of the companies is called Ortane. I'm not advertising for them, I don't know them, but just as an example, that they could identify not by the label or the packaging to see where this product is coming from, but it's not analyzing its own fiber, but analyzing the environment that grew the product. For example, like the air, the soil, that the product grew in. So they have samples of these, whether it's soil or water or air. So they can analyze the element that were involved in growing. So they will be able to identify the origin of this product, whether it's cotton or whether it's other types of material, but it won't apply for all material.
It's organic, right?
It has to be organic, not like aluminum or steel. It won't work.
But cotton, tomatoes,
yes.
jujubes, whatever.
Yes. So they are able to identify, and I do know there are companies have already started using such technologies. The U.S. Custom Border Protection have started using this technology to define whether the origin of this product is sourced from the Uyghur region. And there are also for public use, there are not AI technologies, but it's less intense. People can download it on their laptop, actually. There's a Google Chrome that you could use for shopping. It's called Uyghur Forced Labor Brand Checker. It's free. You can just go to, it only works on your laptop.
It's like a Chrome attachment.
Yes, it's like a Chrome attachment. So whenever you shop, I mean, I advise you not to shop brand new, but if you have to, if you must. So the moment once you add that to your plugin, and if you, let's say you go to Zara, the moment you open the Zara homepage, one banner will pop up and say, oops, this item might be tainted by Uyghur forced labor. Are you sure you want to shop from here? And if you say yes, I guess you just chose to shop there. And if you say no, it will lead you to an information page to educate you on more on details. And then for some brands, like for instance, Reformation, if you go to this brand, the homepage will pop up, congratulations, this brand have been trying everything they can to, to monitor their supply chains to prevent themselves from being tainted by Uyghur forced labor. Please go ahead and shop. So I think it's a really fun tool to use, and it saves you lots of time from looking up and spend hours to do research. So there are there are databases that are available, reports that are available have identified which companies have been linked to Uyghur forced labor. Excuse me. You are welcome to visit our website where we have organized all the reports into our page on the reports page for the Coalition to End Uyghur Forced Labor, and you can just review it. And
well, thank you, Jewher, for that, and thank you all for your questions and your attention, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much.